Hey guys, welcome back, it's Ripe again. In today's video, an entitled Karen constantly parks on my factory property and continues to trespass even after I give her several warnings. After getting towed, she sues me and tries to get me arrested. Here is what happened. Let's dive right in. I should start by saying that I am a proud businessman that owns a cosmetics factory in the more remote regions of the country. I moved here 5 years ago when the company CEO gave me a promotion, forgetting to press the importance that it was also a mandatory relocation. The company later went bankrupt and I bought the rights to the factory from them. This left me as my own boss. Since then, I have continued to produce and ship cosmetics, growing slowly in fame over the years. I thought my neighbors would be the least of my problems in this mission, but I quickly found out that Karen would be my hardest obstacle. It was a rainy Monday morning when I arrived to open the factory, a whole 2 hours before I expected to see another soul. Despite that, I was astonished to find mine was not the first car here, but calling around resulted in no answers. On closer inspection, I realized I knew these cars, which belonged to my neighbor's family and friends. My neighbor Karen lived a short walk down the road and was the only other building for miles around. Recently, due to the heavy storms across the country, I had opened my parking lot to her, allowing her visitors to park here on the weekends. It was clear by now that my kindness was taken for granted, as for whatever reason, their cars remained. Hoping to clear up the mess quickly, I rang Karen before the workday started, finally getting through on the 6th ring. Karen was sluggish and unhappy about the wake-up call, less so as I explained my situation. She said she had a party last night and that everyone was still asleep. When I asked again about whether they could be moved, she said she would do it later before hanging up on me. An hour passed before I finally lost patience. I had given her as much time as I could, and after my last call ended in being completely ignored, I felt left with little choice but to move the cars myself. The tow truck arrived and was soon followed by another after they realized the huge scope of the task. Like a giant puzzle game, we maneuvered the abandoned cars onto a small field outside the parking lot as a growing number of employees began to queue down the road. Luckily, the situation was resolved fairly quickly and work was largely unaffected. For my stress and effort in the relocation, I gave Karen's details to the towing company and told them that she would pay for the job. The morning went by quietly with no word or sign from Karen at all. But then in the early afternoon, I was notified about a group of angry people in the parking lot causing a commotion and walking around aimlessly. The troublemakers turned out to be none other than Karen and her family, who were looking for their cars. Approaching the ringleader, I told Karen that I had to get them towed away so they were not blocking my employees from parking here. That was met by widespread outrage as they now began to surround me as they each let their emotions out on me as a target dummy. To quell their riot, I agreed to call the company and have the cars brought to her house, though I failed to mention the extra fees Karen would be charged for the drop-off. A few hours later, I was getting ready to close up when I heard a hard knocking at the door, which continued into a frenzied banging that moved all around the building. Being the only person still here, I was torn on what to do. Fear and curiosity each pulling me in different directions. As I fumbled in my office, the noise died down, and by the time I left, I saw no sign of what caused it. After arriving home and settling down for the evening, I realized I had a missed call from Karen, presumably done while I was driving. Karen had gotten her cars back now, but was very noticeably pissed off that she was landed with the $50 towing fees, which she had arrogantly presumed I would cover, as it was my fault. As if. She swore that I would pay for it too. A week later, I was sorting through my mail when I found one strange envelope without a name or address printed. Opening it carefully, it appeared to be a formal court document that had been scribbled over. Karen was opening a lawsuit against me and supposedly sent me a copy in order to gloat. The charges, as she listed them, were racial discrimination, death threats, and a civil offense for getting her cars towed without consent. I found each crime more ridiculous than the last one. For starters, I had never and would never discriminate against another human being, let alone a neighbor to whom I've never exchanged more than 10 words. This made the idea of a death threat also absurd, which I imagine she also made up to make the police take it more seriously. The towing was something I did, though she was keen to forget that the cars were left on my property in the first place. I saw no reason to take the lawsuit seriously, and after showing it to my attorney, he assured me it had no legal standing. Karen wanted me to sweat and panic, so I was happy to ignore her this time. I thought after her first failed attempt at getting me into trouble, she would have learned her lesson and got over it, but instead she seemed to double down on her revenge plot. It was an ordinary weekday afternoon when my factory met yet another interruption. Police cars swarmed the parking lot and filled into the factory fully equipped with SWAT gear and search dogs. They had received an anonymous tip that the factory was producing drugs, which they took with the utmost seriousness. My employees and I were ordered outside and kept under strict surveillance until they finished their sweep of the area. I did my best to keep morale and emotions stable, but my employees were just as confused and anxious as I was. Of course, the sweep didn't turn up anything, but after that and the interviews that followed, it was dark by the time we were allowed to leave. That evening, I was surprised to find the incident had made the evening news. My business was getting noticed now, but for all the wrong reasons. Most employees did not turn up to work the next morning, many of them citing issues of sickness or stress caused by the raid. There was only one person around that would do something this evil, and I was sick of letting her get away with it. I did a little digging into my options for dealing with my vengeful neighbor and came to the attention of a private investigator who managed to dig up something pretty neat as well. As if Karen could not be any more despicable, it turned out that she had her own little tax problem, very ironic considering the crime she tried to accuse me of. Karen had a small baking side hustle from which she only exchanged cash and had never before announced it to the tax offices. Well, that's okay because I did it for her. Following her outburst, Karen had been in the public and police spotlight for a while. This didn't help when an anonymous tip told everyone about her tax evasion scheme. To add insult to injury, I pressed my own charges with a counter lawsuit due to the damages she had done to me and my business since the towing occurred. It was a heartwarming thing to see. After these difficult few days of putting up with all kinds of harassment, it was now Karen's turn to feel the heat. And since the claims I made against her had some real merit, it was not immediately ignored like all the accusations against me. I made sure to let the police know that I was ready to pursue this case for as long as it took, which happened to lead us both onto the opposite sides of a courtroom. Her attorney even had the nerve to pull up her entire family as witness testimony, going for the quantity over quality approach to human character. Though it was a hard fight to get the judge to sift through the lies Karen told under oath, we did manage to reach a suitable result on the third week of trying. Karen was found guilty of defamation, filing false police reports and tax evasion, nearly adding contempt to the list when she refused to shut up during the sentencing. Despite her best efforts, she was given 6 years behind bars for her misdeeds, along with a huge $20,000 fine to me for emotional damages. Better yet, she was ordered to sell the finances before her prison term, meaning that she could not pretend or ignore the debt, hoping it would go away. With the result and the following announcement on the news, I was able to recover my reputation and work continued as normal. Karen pleaded to me in a private meeting after the sentencing to clear her fines, but I denied her request. What I did do at least was allow her to pay me back in installments, which now pays the rent on my factory. Enjoy prison, Karen. See you when you get out. And here, Ripe Stars, it is just so heartwarming to see Karen getting what she deserves. If you still enjoy the Karen stories, then please don't forget to like the video and maybe even leave a comment, and of course subscribe if you haven't already for daily content. Thank you so much, and now let's continue with the next one, which is an HOA story. After months of searching, I finally found my dream home. It was a cozy little bungalow with a big fenced-in yard, perfect for my 2 big dogs, SUES and Apollo. The neighborhood seemed quiet and friendly, full of kids playing and neighbors waving. I could not wait to move in. On closing day, I excitedly picked up the keys and did a final walkthrough of my new place. As I wandered from room to room dreaming of future renovations, I noticed a stack of papers left on the kitchen counter. Picking them up, I realized they were some kind of association documents. Ah, an HOA, I murmured to myself. Guess I'll have to read up on their rules. I knew some HOAs had strict regulations, but I didn't think much of it. The neighborhood vibe seemed so laid back, how bothersome could they really be? Just 2 days after moving in, I found out. I awoke to an aggressive pounding on my front door early Saturday morning. Groggily, I answered in my pajamas to find an impatient middle-aged man standing on my porch. "Are you the homeowner?" he demanded. Before I could even respond, he continued, "I'm Robert, president of the HOA. We have received complaints of an unauthorized structure in your backyard." Still half asleep, I stared blankly until I realized he must be talking about the doghouse I just built for SUES and Apollo. "Oh, I'm so sorry," I stammered. "I didn't realize I needed approval for a doghouse. I can submit an application if..." "Just see that it's gone by tomorrow," Robert interrupted. And with that, he marched off. I stood there utterly bewildered. Gone by tomorrow? But I had just spent hours constructing the perfect little home for my puppies. And yet, destroying my hard work seemed to be my only choice if I didn't want to immediately start off on the wrong foot. Letting out a I grabbed a coffee and got to work taking apart the new doghouse. So much for that Saturday relaxation I had planned. At least now I was up to speed on the HOA rules. I would have to treat carefully. In the following weeks, I did my best to stay on Robert's good side. I submitted proposals for any exterior changes, ensuring every modification strictly followed HOA guidelines. I kept my lawn meticulously manicured and my home exterior crisp and clean. But it did not seem to matter. The violation notices kept coming for the most nitpicky infractions. A weed in my garden, a missing shingle on my roof, leaving my trash bin out 45 minutes past the deadline on trash day. Each time I would receive the same demand: comply or pay a fine. I tried reasoning with Robert, but he refused to budge. "Rules are rules, violations have consequences," became his favorite line as he casually doled out fines like parking tickets. Didn't this guy have anything better to do than harass homeowners over these petty non-issues? The final straw came when I arrived home after a 2-week vacation to find my grass half dead and overgrown. The Florida heatwave had done a number on it in my absence. The very next day, I received a notice from Robert stating I owed a $200 fine for extreme lawn negligence, and had 1 week to resort the entire thing. $200 just because I went on vacation? Now he was just being vindictive. I'd had enough of living under the reign of this power-hungry HOA despot. So I called my lawyer and asked what I could do to fight back. She confirmed that the constant harassment and unreasonable fines breached HOA ethics and codes. We drafted a letter informing Robert that I would not only refuse to pay his absurd fines, but I would be filing a civil suit against him for abuse of power and harassment. As expected, Robert didn't take kindly to my refusal to bow before his regime. He sent threatening letters saying non-payment of fines would result in a lien placed on my home. He clearly failed to grasp that I was now holding the reins of this conflict. I had the law on my side while all he had was intimidation and empty threats. The thought of us locking horns in court made me tense but also excited. It was high time that someone stood up to this bully. On the big day in court, I was nervous but ready. Dressed in my best suit and tie, I presented my binder full of unreasonable notices and fines along with records of the HOA bylaws Robert was violating with his power grabs. He tried to justify his harsh treatment as by-the-book enforcement, but I could see that we had the judge sympathetic to our plight. When it came time for the ruling, the judge chastised Robert for exploiting his position and taking disciplinary action to unethical extremes. She deemed the $200 lawn fine and all preceding fines invalid and unlawful. In addition, she granted me a 3-year restraining order, barring Robert from contacting me or setting foot on my property. The ruling was liberating. I walked out of that courthouse, banner held high, knowing the HOA tyranny ended that day. But surprisingly, the story didn't end there. In the following weeks, I noticed fewer violation notices cropping up around the neighborhood. People approached me to share their own sagas of abuse under Robert's regime. The breaking point came when outraged neighbors stormed an HOA meeting demanding Robert's resignation. With his reputation in tatters, Robert stepped down in disgrace. A new board was voted in, one committed to serving our community, not terrorizing it over lawn length. They even repealed the most unreasonable rules and fines enacted by Robert. I was asked to join the board but politely declined. After my ordeal, I'd had enough of the HOA life, but I was grateful to know the neighborhood was now in more reasonable hands. And yeah, Ripe Stars, it's always good to see a nice ending to an HOA story. You know, stories like these can end very differently if the HOA would win the lawsuit, for example. Sometimes it's really like a David versus Goliath story. Thankfully, it seems in this case David won. Either way, the next one is titled Accident Revenge. So a week ago, I ended up getting sideswiped on my way home from work. Nothing major, but the circumstances were stupid. Street I was on is 2 lanes each way. I was in the left lane and saw that people were stopping because someone wanted to turn left into a coffee shop. There was a flatbed truck in the right lane, so I let it pass and then changed lanes to go around. Cue the blonde in the SUV in front of me deciding to do the same thing as I am right beside her. Crunch. We pull off onto a side street just ahead and she starts acting like an idiot and insinuating that this is all my fault. And thanking me for the damage now done to her precious car. My mirror ended up going right into the middle of her passenger door, leaving a nice dent, and there were some scrapes on her fender and mine. No damage to my mirror at all, just a scuff. It's like when you drop a TV on a Nintendo 64 and it just laughs. So while she is acting all entitled, I just tell her to call the cops so we can get this over with. We get told it's gonna be a while since it's minor, so we then get told to just swap info, then go to the collision reporting center by the cop headquarters at our convenience. Fine by me, she goes off mentioning something about having to be in court. Bye! So where's the revenge, you may be wondering? Well, all the while she's doing her thing, I never mentioned that I have a dash cam. It caught everything on video, so after she leaves I go home, pull the footage and put it on a memory card. I head out to the collision center figuring that she won't be there for quite a while. Officer that calls me up asks about what happened, I tell him, he then asks me if she's gonna tell a different story. I mention my dashcam footage and he gets a little excited as he says, well, that would be the proof, wouldn't it? As he pops it into his reader. As soon as he watched what happened, he just says, ah, I see what happened. She was looking at the truck and not you. I then get told that I'm not at fault and we head outside so he can take photos of my damage. Once he is done, he says that I'm good to go and it's up to me if I want to put in a claim to my insurance to fix everything. I thank him and head home. I'm not fixing anything. My car is a piece of crap Chrysler and is a few steps away from the scrapyard, so I don't really care. But man, I would have loved to see the look on her face when she went to report everything and realized this was all on her. Plus, she doesn't even have a full license yet, just a G2, kind of halfway to a full one, so her insurance is gonna go way up. And now we will continue to the next one, which is an Am I the A-hole story, and it is titled Am I the jerk for screaming so loud that somebody called the cops on me? It was supposed to be my brother's, 14 male's, turn to do the dishes and he either forgot or completely disregarded about it, so I, 16 female, had to clean up the sink and dishes at 9 PM. I noticed some sound coming from the cabinets and realized that there was trash in the small gap between them towards the back, so I found myself a thin stick and tried to clear the things out. There was a lot of trash inside: potato chip wrappers, sweet wrappers, some unknown wrappers with stains, rubber bands, tissue paper, and biggest of all, a crushed cereal box. To my horror, I saw the whole nest of large cockroaches coming out from the cereal box. I'm terrified of cockroaches and our kitchen had been free of them since recently. Guess I know where they came from now. With a scream, I tossed the box away from me and out came 5 cockroaches. There were more coming out from the cabinet gaps too. All that trash made a good nest. I stormed to my brother's room and pulled him up from his game, demanded to have him clean all that up since he is not afraid of cockroaches. He initially refused but reluctantly came when I insisted. When he picked up the cereal box without warning, he threw it at me and it landed on my face, and with it the cockroaches running down my hair and clothes. So here comes the a-hole part. I had a complete meltdown as I screamed my lungs out until my throat gave in and not even my parents could hush me when they came. When I finally calmed down, we heard knocking at our door as our concerned neighbors called the cops after hearing my screams. My parents were super embarrassed and after the cops left blamed me for overreacting. I pointed out that it was my brother who didn't do his dishes, stuffed trash into the cabinet gaps resulting in cockroaches, and threw them at me when he knew I'm scared of them. Furthermore, I couldn't control it, I just lost it. They don't buy that and just kept scolding and blaming me as my brother laughed from the side. I had to take a shower and bury myself in the bed crying. So Reddit, am I the a-hole? I sure hope not, but if I am, then at least I know I deserved it. And yeah, Ripe Stars, let me know what you think about this. Do you think that OP is the a-hole or not? The first comment said, not the a-hole, you had a panic attack and your parents are a-holes to let your brother act like that. Did you know that CPS would be interested in knowing that your parents let you live in filth? Comment number 2, not the a-hole, your brother is disgusting, your parents suck for not parenting him because it's easier to yell at you. I'm sorry he did that to you. And yeah, Ripe Stars, I gotta say, I'm not sure if I agree with the first comment, since it kind of insinuates that OP might wanna call CPS on her parents. Since we don't have enough background information really to make such a statement, I would probably hold off from calling CPS just because the place is dirty. Of course, the situation would be different if OP says that her parents are like so bad, don't take care of her or whatever, but I don't think we can draw such conclusions from this story. But maybe you disagree, let me know in the comments. And with this, we have reached the end of the video. However, if you cannot get enough of my content, please check out my endless playlist, where you can find thousands of hours of content. In addition, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel to not miss any of my daily uploads. Thank you so much in advance, and I hope to see you again tomorrow.